They say you can feel the moment your life shifts. For me, it was 8:42 a.m. on a Wednesday. The sky was gray, heavy with rain that hadn't started yet, and I sat in my car outside the courthouse, watching the windshield collect condensation as I waited for the courage to open the door. I hadn't worn black. That would have felt too much like a funeral. Instead, I wore a muted burgundy suit. Sharp, clean, controlled, like armor stitched in silence. Today was divorce day, not the day we stopped loving. That had come years earlier in 1,000 tiny pieces, forgotten anniversaries, half-hearted apologies, the quiet choke of being invisible while still married. No, today was about signatures and legal jargon, division of assets, custody schedules, the performance of moving on. I took a breath and reached for my folder, my so-called receipts, text messages, bank statements, emails sent to me by accident, a printed log of unexplained transfers, and screenshots, lots of them. I had labeled them by date and category like evidence in a trial because in many ways that's what this was. He thought I was weak, emotional, soft, but I was organized. And I had proof. I stepped into the courthouse lobby with careful posture, ignoring the squeak of my heels on the polished floor. Security was as indifferent as ever, waving me through without comment. I clutched my folder like a lifeline. As I approached the courtroom, I saw them, him and her. She wore white, a cruel joke, or maybe just ignorance. She was younger, slim, polished, with impossibly shiny hair. The kind of woman who probably called herself a girl boss and posted selfies about manifesting the life she deserved. She looked like someone who thought courtrooms were just TikTok backdrops with better lighting. He stood beside her with a smirk that made my skin crawl. It wasn't just confidence. It was weaponized. He wasn't hiding the relationship. He was showcasing it, holding her hand, whispering something that made her laugh just loud enough for others to look. His body language screamed, "Look what I've upgraded to." People around us took notice. A bailiff raised an eyebrow. A woman with a stroller glanced between us, then quickly away. I felt like a headline, but I didn't react. Instead, I smiled. Because he had no idea what was coming. Inside, the courtroom felt colder than I remembered. The chairs were arranged like judgment seats. My attorney, Rachel, met me at the table and handed me a bottle of water I didn't ask for. She was sharp, a litigator with a calm that could slice granite. "They're trying to rattle you," she said without looking up from her notes. "Don't give it to them." I nodded once. He walked in behind me, dragging his new girlfriend in like a trophy on parade. A few people whispered. Even the judge glanced briefly in her direction. Didn't need to look back. I could feel their presence behind me like a heat source I had no interest in warming by. Rachel leaned over. "Do you want her removed? We can ask." I shook my head. "No," I whispered. "Let her stay. Let her see." When the proceedings began, his side moved quickly, confident, rehearsed, as though they were checking off a list. His lawyer painted him as the stable one, the provider, the parent who wanted consistency. There were subtle jabs at my emotional instability and vague references to my unreliable financial decisions. I listened. I kept my face neutral. Then they brought up the business account, the missing funds, the miscommunication that led to thousands disappearing. He claimed I had misunderstood, that I was unfamiliar with how the business operated, that I was prone to paranoia. I let him speak, and then, slowly, calmly, I pulled out my folder. Tab A, bank statement. Tab B, screenshot of his email confirming the transfer. Tab C, a time-stamped photo of him withdrawing cash, with her standing behind him. Rachel laid them on the table like poker cards. The courtroom shifted. His lawyer blinked. The judge frowned. Even the court reporter looked up. I didn't look at him, but I knew. I knew. The smirk was gone. The silence that followed was glorious. Derek's smirk, once his signature expression, had vanished into something raw and twitchy. His jaw clenched. His eyes darted between the judge and the K. Evidence like a man trying to do math in a fire. His lawyer leaned over, whispering quickly now, flipping through notes, visibly thrown. The tempo of their confidence had fractured. Rachel sat calmly beside me, like a surgeon who had just made the first incision. "They didn't see that coming," she muttered, without lifting her gaze from the table. The judge cleared his throat. "I'd like to recess for 10 minutes, he said, already standing. "I want time to review this documentation." Bang of the gavel. I exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. In the hallway outside, Derek tried to regain control. He motioned to his girlfriend to stay seated, then approached me. Not too close, but close enough that the tension was unmistakable. "You're making a fool of yourself," he said quietly, "dragging this through the mud. It's pathetic." I turned to him slowly, evenly. "You brought your rebound to court," I replied. "If anyone's making this a circus, it's the clown." His eyes narrowed. "I'm just saying," he hissed. "None of this will matter. Judges don't care about screenshots, they care about records." "That's exactly what I brought," I said. "And the receipts aren't the only thing I've got." Rachel stepped forward at that point, her body half between us. "Do not speak to my client again without counsel. That's the last warning." He sneered and turned back toward the courtroom. His girlfriend, now less confident, was staring down at her phone, likely realizing this wasn't the dramatic love story she thought she was starring in. Back inside, the judge returned with his glasses lower on his nose than before, a subtle cue that he'd read something that disturbed him. He looked directly at Derek's attorney. "These documents raise serious concerns about financial conduct during the marriage," he said. "I'd like to remind both parties that full disclosure is not optional. This will impact the division of property." Derek's lawyer nodded stiffly. Rachel slid one more document forward, a notarized affidavit from Derek's former assistant, detailing how she'd been instructed to move money between accounts to avoid questions. The room pulsed with disbelief. The judge sighed, then turned to Derek directly. "You were warned once about transparency in this court. That warning is now considered exhausted. In legal terms, that was a devastating blow. In emotional terms, it was a tidal wave crashing into his performance. By the end of the day, the dynamic had reversed entirely. Instead of pushing for full custody, Derek was scrambling to keep partial. His demands about the house were dropped without a word. His lawyer went from smug to shell-shocked in a span of hours. The judge's final remark before adjourning that day was simple, sharp, and cut right to the center. "Ms. Monroe, thank you for your meticulous documentation. It clarified many things. Mr. Reeves, I suggest you rethink your definition of truth before entering another courtroom." And that was it. Bang of the gavel. Day one closed. And the myth of Derek Reeves, charming husband, innocent businessman, misunderstood ex, collapsed under the weight of his own digital footprint. I walked out of the courtroom feeling lighter. Thanks, poor. Rain had started while we were inside, but I didn't run for cover. I let it soak my blazer and flatten my hair. It didn't matter, because for the first time in years I wasn't carrying him anymore. I wasn't carrying his version of me. The parking lot was mostly empty. As I reached my car, I heard heels approaching. Behind me. I turned to see her. The girlfriend. She looked different now. The gloss was gone. Her makeup had begun to smudge from stress or weather or both. She stopped a few feet away, hesitant. "I didn't know," she said, voice barely, above the rain. "About all that. About you. About what he did." I said nothing. She swallowed hard. "He told me you were unstable, that you were bitter, that you were trying to destroy him." I raised an eyebrow. "And now?" Her eyes dropped. "Now I think, I'm next." I didn't smile, I didn't gloat, I simply said, "Then leave before he writes your story for you." She nodded, almost imperceptibly, then turned and walked the other way. That night, I lit a candle in my living room and sat in the quiet. My son was at his friend's house. The silence was deep, but not hollow. It was earned. I opened my laptop, clicked on a new document. and typed the title, Divorce Day. He brought his new girlfriend, but I brought receipts. Because some stories don't end in courtrooms, some of them begin after. The internet has its own kind of justice. By morning, the whispers had already begun to echo louder than any court ruling. Someone, probably one of the paralegals or an assistant in the hallway, had leaked a portion of the documents from the courtroom, not the most sensitive parts, but enough, a few redacted screenshots, a headline on a local gossip blog. Then Twitter got involved. Businessman Derek Reeves caught transferring funds during messy divorce. She brought receipts, literally. The comment section lit up like a bonfire, and while I wasn't tagged directly, I saw it. I read every thread, watched people debate over my name without knowing me. Some accused me of being vindictive. Others called me brave. Some simply said, "Finally, a woman who came prepared." I didn't post anything. I didn't need to. Truth has a voice even in silence. Meanwhile, Derek was unraveling. Rachel called me around noon. His team filed an emergency. Motion to seal all documents, she said, half amused, half annoyed. It won't change the outcome, it's just damage control. I laughed, genuinely, for the first time in weeks. Of course he wanted it sealed. He built his whole reputation on being squeaky clean, a self-made man. Integrity was his brand. That screenshot of him transferring money while texting his assistant to make sure she doesn't find out would wreck him professionally, and it wasn't even the worst of it. What Derek didn't realize was that I had held back, in part, to protect our son. In part, because I didn't want to become like him, weaponizing everything out of spite. But, mostly, because I knew the truth would eventually do what it always does, rise. That afternoon, I sat in my kitchen, drinking tea and sorting through mail. Real mail, envelopes, paper. A bill here, a credit card offer there. A letter from the school reminding me of the parent-teacher conference, and then something else. A card. Plain white envelope, no return address, no handwriting on the outside. I opened it slowly, suspicious at first. Inside was a folded photo. It was old, maybe 4 years ago. Me, Derek, and our son Liam, at the beach. We were all smiling. But I remembered that day clearly. We'd argued that morning over nothing. He hadn't spoken to me the entire drive. That smile on his face, it was fake. It always had been. Behind, the photo was a sticky note, just 6 words scrawled in ink I recognized immediately. "You were never supposed to win." I stared at it. It wasn't a threat, it was a confession, and it meant one thing. Derek was rattled enough to try psychological games, which meant he was scared. I put the photo down and walked into my bedroom, pulling open the drawer that held the rest of my evidence, the things I hadn't yet used. There were receipts, yes, literal ones, plane tickets bought under fake names, hotel confirmations, an email exchange between Derek and a real estate agent about a condo to be kept off the books. But there was one folder I hadn't touched, one labeled Liam. It had custody implications. Things I hadn't wanted to drag into court unless absolutely necessary. Not because I wanted to protect Derek, but because I didn't want Liam to suffer. Now, though, Derek had sent a photo and a threat masked as nostalgia, and all bets were off. That night I called Rachel. "I think it's time we use everything," I said. There was silence on the line, then a quiet, "Are you sure?" "No," I answered, "but I'm ready." The next morning we filed for full custody, not out of revenge, out of necessity, and with it we submitted everything. The photos, the financials, the testimonies, and one final letter, a sworn statement from a counselor. Liam had been seeing at school. It confirmed what I had feared but suspected. Derek's absence had affected Liam more than I had realized, and the counselor had heard things Liam was too afraid to say to me directly. He says his dad gets scary when people don't listen. He says Dad tells him I'm broken, that I'm dangerous. That line cut deeper than any screenshot, because now it wasn't just about betrayal. It was about my child. Back at the courthouse, Day 2 began with less show and more strategy. Derek didn't bring the girlfriend this time. He came alone, looking less polished. His tie was slightly crooked, his skin pale. He saw the new stack of files Rachel handed to the clerk and flinched. When the judge entered, the air changed. "Let's proceed," he said. "I see we have new documentation." Rachel stood, poised and precise. She didn't rush. She let the silence hang before she spoke. "Your Honor, these materials pertain to custody. We believe the court deserves a full view of not only financial behavior but the environment surrounding the child in question." The judge glanced down, scanning the first few pages. His eyes narrowed. "This changes things." "Yes, it did." And finally, the conversation wasn't about me anymore. It was about what mattered. The judge read in silence. With every line, the color in Derek's face faded. He tried to stay composed, but the subtle shifts gave him away. The way he tapped his thumb against his leg, the twitch in his jaw, the glance toward the gallery where no one sat for him. This wasn't just court anymore. It was exposure. "Mr. Reeves," the judge finally said, voice measured but pointed. "Did you at any point coerce your child into speaking negatively about his mother?" Derek hesitated. Then, as if the silence might protect him, he said, "Absolutely not." Rachel stood immediately. "Your Honor, may I direct the court to page 47 of the affidavit?" The judge flipped, "Read," then closed the file slowly. "We'll break for 20 minutes, he announced. The courtroom emptied, but the silence followed us. In the corridor, I leaned against the wall, eyes closed. Rachel was on her phone, talking to a colleague, her voice low and steady. That's when Liam's counselor approached. I hadn't seen her enter. Her presence was like calm in a storm. "You're doing the right thing," she said simply. I nodded. "But at what cost?" She looked at me and answered without hesitation. "At the cost of healing. And healing always has a price." Back inside, the court resumed, but Derek didn't. He was no longer performing. He looked like a man watching his house burn down from the inside, and knowing he'd lit the match. Rachel delivered our closing remarks on the motion for custody. Clear, focused, human. Then Derek's lawyer spoke, but there was no defense, not really. Just technicalities and a limp attempt to shift focus. And then the judge gave his temporary ruling. "Based on the evidence presented," he said, "I am awarding Ms. Monroe full physical custody of Liam, effective immediately, pending final ruling. Mr. Reeves will have supervised visitation until further review." My heart dropped, then rose, then shattered and healed in one motion. I turned my face toward the gallery. No applause, no noise, just breath. Outside, Derek followed me again. "You think you won?" he spat. "You're poisoning him against me." "No," I said, calm but firm. "You did that yourself. I just stopped covering for you." He stood still for a moment, then said something he hadn't said in years. "You used to love me." I turned, looked at him for what he was, not what I remembered, not what I tried to fix, but what he had always been. "Yes," I whispered. "And you used to deserve it." That night I picked Liam up from his friend's house. He ran to me, hugged me tighter than usual. I didn't ask him what he'd heard. I didn't ask him what he thought. I just held him, and for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't feel broken. I felt real, because the receipts I brought weren't just texts or transactions. They were moments. Moments I refused to let be rewritten by someone else's version of the story. The silence after victory is never quite what you expect. It isn't filled with joy or confetti or applause. It's heavy. Still. A breath held in the chest for too long. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the window, like it hadn't in weeks. Liam was still asleep in his room, wrapped in his blue blanket, the one he refused to give up even after turning 9. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, holding my phone in my hand, not knowing what to do with it. There were no threats, no angry texts from Derek. Just quiet. I should have felt safe. But safety after trauma feels like a foreign country. Later that morning, I met Rachel for coffee. She looked different in jeans and a sweater, less like a shark and more like the woman who had called me 3 months ago and said, "We're going to make him regret underestimating you." "Congratulations," she said, handing me a muffin. "Now we deal with what comes next." "What comes next?" I asked, already exhausted. "The part most people forget. The rebuilding," I sighed. "You mean the emotional debris?" She smiled faintly. "Exactly. In the following days, Derek kept quiet. Too quiet. I knew him. Silence wasn't peace. It was planning. And sure enough, on Friday morning, I received an email from his attorney. They were requesting a mediation meeting, not to reverse custody, but to discuss the division of remaining assets and reputational concerns. Reputational concerns. That was Rich. He didn't care about the money. Not anymore. What he cared about was how people were looking at him now. How his pristine image had cracked, and everyone could see the rot beneath the shine. I accepted the meeting, not to argue, but to finish it. The mediation took place in a quiet office near downtown. Neutral territory, a gray carpet, bland chairs, a fake plant wilting in the corner. Derek arrived 5 minutes late looking tired. Not broken. He was too proud for that. But deflated. And beside him, to my surprise, was not his new girlfriend, not a lawyer, but his older brother, Nate. Nate had always been the opposite of Derek, grounded, quiet, respectful. He nodded at me when he walked in, and for a second I thought I saw something like apology in his eyes. The mediator, a woman in her 50s with the patience of a saint, opened the session. "We're here to review the final division of property, digital assets, and to establish a communications agreement related to the child." I let Rachel handle most of it. I watched Derek. He didn't speak until the very end. When the mediator asked if either party had anything to say before signing the agreement, he looked at me. Not with anger, not with love, but something in between. "I never thought you'd go this far," he said quietly. I replied just as softly, "I didn't go far. I went enough." We left without a handshake. As we stepped into the elevator, I felt Nate's eyes on me. He waited until Derek had walked ahead, then whispered, "I'm sorry for what he did to you." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. Sometimes silence is the most powerful response. That night I lit a candle in my kitchen. No ceremony, just stillness. I took out a sheet of paper and wrote down everything I had lost, and everything I had gained. It wasn't even or fair. But it was honest. At the bottom I wrote one word in bold letters, freedom. Then I folded the paper and burned it in the sink. Let the past turn to ash. Tomorrow would be mine. The days that followed moved in strange rhythms, too fast when I wanted to pause, too slow when I wished it would all be over. It had been a week since the court ruling, a week since Derek had walked out of that mediation office without looking back. But what lingered wasn't the silence. It was the echoes of everything that had been said and everything that had never been. Liam, por outro lado, estava diferente. Ele ainda era o mesmo menino de sorriso tímido e perguntas infinitas, mas havia algo nos olhos dele agora. Tipo de alívio. Como se algo pesado tivesse sido tirado de seus ombros pequenos, mesmo que ele ainda não entendesse exatamente o que. Na noite de terça-feira ele me chamou no quarto. "Mamãe, a gente não vai mais voltar para aquela casa antiga, né?" Respirei fundo antes de responder. "Não, filho. Aquela parte da nossa vida ficou para trás." "Que bom", ele disse baixinho. Ela era muito barulhenta, mesmo quando estava silenciosa. E eu entendi. Mais do que ele podia imaginar, eu entendi. Na quinta, Rachel me enviou uma mensagem. "Verifique seu e-mail. Urgente." Abri imediatamente. Era uma solicitação formal de Derek. Ele queria autorização para publicar uma carta pública, esclarecendo os fatos do processo de divórcio. Dizia que estava sendo injustamente julgado nas redes sociais, que seu papel como pai estava sendo distorcido e que a exposição pública o estava prejudicando profissionalmente. Mas o que me chamou a atenção mesmo foi o final. Ito, na esperança de que Júlia queira colaborar para um texto conjunto que proteja nosso filho da polarização desta narrativa. Meu sangue ferveu. Narrativa, ele queria que eu compartilhasse a culpa, dividisse a responsabilidade, que eu fingisse que tudo foi apenas uma série de mal-entendidos mútuos, que a culpa era de nós, e não só dele. Eu digitei uma resposta, curta. Não autorizo. E não colaboro com revisionismo emocional. Rachel respondeu com um emoji de aplauso, mas ele não se deu por vencido. 2 dias depois, um post apareceu no perfil de Derek. Longo, denso, uma mistura de vitimismo e frases genéricas sobre aprender com os erros e continuar amando, o filho acima de tudo. Não havia menção direta a mim, mas era claro quem ele queria atingir. E foi aí que algo inesperado aconteceu. Os comentários estavam abertos, e as respostas não eram o que ele esperava. Você mentiu e manipulou. Agora quer se fazer de mártir? Ainda bem que seu filho tem a mãe dele. Ninguém acredita nesse texto polido. Onde estão os prints dela? As pessoas sabiam. A verdade tinha escapado da caixa. E ele não podia mais controlá-la. Na semana seguinte, recebi uma ligação. Era uma jornalista de um portal respeitado, dizendo que estava produzindo uma matéria sobre violência emocional e abuso psicológico em divórcios. Não queremos expor nomes, ela garantiu. Mas achamos que sua história pode ajudar outras mulheres. Minha primeira reação foi recusar. Mas então pensei em Liam, em outras mães, em tudo o que eu tive que engolir em silêncio, e disse: eu falo, mas quero controle total sobre o que será publicado. Ela aceitou. Passei a tarde contando minha versão, a real, sem floreios, sem vingança, só a verdade. E quando desliguei, senti algo novo, paz. Na sexta, fui buscar Liam na escola. Ele saiu correndo, mochila nas costas e papel na mão. Ganhei uma estrela dourada. Peguei o papel e sorri. Era um desenho. Um castelo grande com janelas abertas, e no alto, um sol com olhos felizes. Esse é nosso novo lugar, ele disse. Onde a gente pode respirar. Ajoelhei e o abracei ali mesmo, no meio do pátio. E entendi que aquele desenho era mais do que imaginação. Era a visão de um menino, reconstruindo sua ideia de lar, não como paredes ou móveis, mas como sensação. E dessa vez não tinha barulho, só luz. There are victories that come quietly, not with a bang, but with a breath. The kind of breath you didn't know you'd been holding for years. It was mid-March when I realized something strange was happening. I wasn't scared anymore. Not of Derek, not of being alone, not of the silence. The silence had become something I could finally trust. Not a warning, a resting place. But then came the letter. Not an email, not a message. A real, hand-signed, thick envelope letter delivered to my mailbox on a Thursday afternoon. The envelope was addressed to Julia Monroe, mother of Liam Reeves. My stomach turned. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the seal like it might bite. Liam was watching TV in the other room, his laughter drifting into the silence like wind chimes. When I finally opened it, my hands trembled. Not from fear, but from sheer exhaustion. Inside was a formal letter from Derek's legal team. It wasn't a threat. It was a proposal. He wanted a second chance. Not with me, with Liam. The words were polite, but sharp. He claimed to have reflected deeply, to have recognized past shortcomings, and most absurdly, to have embarked on a journey of self-healing. He was requesting unsupervised visitation on weekends and 1 week of shared custody during the summer. He even attached a glossy pamphlet from some retreat program for fathers and sons. And then, at the bottom of the letter, was a handwritten note. Julia, you can hate me all you want, but please don't make Liam hate me too. I stared at that sentence for a long time. I wasn't trying to make Liam hate his father. I was trying to make sure Liam never learned to hate himself because of what his father did. I forwarded everything to Rachel. Her response came within 20 minutes. "He's making a move. Let me take care of it." But something told me I needed to face this one differently. I asked Rachel to delay the formal response by a few days. I needed to speak to someone first. I called Nate. Derek's brother had been quiet since the mediation. He had respected the distance, but I remembered the sincerity in his eyes that day. And now, I needed clarity. We met at a coffee shop far from downtown, the kind where no one cares about who you are or what you're whispering about in the corner. Nate arrived exactly on time, looking uncomfortable but composed. "I figured this might come," he said after I slid the letter across the table. "He's been restless." "Restless?" I repeated. "He feels like he's losing control of the one thing that made him feel powerful. Being a dad, at least on the surface." I sipped my coffee. "He doesn't want to be a father. He wants to look like one." Nate nodded. "I won't defend him, but I'll say this. Liam deserves peace. And peace might come from knowing who his father really is, not just being protected from it." That hit me harder than I expected. Was I shielding Liam? Or was I rewriting Derek? In Liam's memory? And where is the line between protection and erasure? That night I sat with Liam on the couch. He was drawing again, this time a spaceship with animals inside it. "Why are there dogs on the spaceship?" I asked. He didn't look up. "Because they know how to find their way home, even in space," smiled. "That's smart." "Yeah," he said. "I wish Daddy knew how to do that. I didn't expect that." "Do you miss him?" I asked gently. He paused. "I miss who I thought he was." And there it was, clarity, spoken by a child. The next morning, I wrote Derek back, not through lawyers, just a plain email. "Derek, I received your letter. I acknowledge your request. But before anything formal is addressed, you need to understand something. You don't rebuild trust with forms or programs or press releases. You rebuild trust with presence, with humility, with time. I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to protect Liam. If you want to be in his life, you'll need to show up, consistently, quietly, and for him, not for your reputation. Consider this your first opportunity. We'll be at the community center this Saturday for Liam's art showcase. If you come, don't make it about you. Just watch him, and let him watch you, the real you." "Julia," I hit send. Then I sat back in my chair and exhaled. Because sometimes, justice isn't about the court. Sometimes it's about giving someone just enough space to choose who they really want to be, and watching what they do with it. Saturday dawned with a clear sky, the kind that whispers something is about to change. The kind of morning that starts in silence but hums with anticipation. Liam woke up excited. It was the day of his art showcase at the community center. A project he'd been working on for weeks with his school teacher. "Can we buy balloons?" he asked, still in pajamas. "Of course," I said. "Today is your day." We left early to pick up the blue balloons he wanted. All the while, my mind spun with one burning question. Would Derek show up? I didn't know what was worse. Him, coming and doing everything wrong, or him not coming at all and leaving yet another void for Liam to fill. We arrived at the community center half an hour before opening. The hall was already buzzing, drawings being hung, cardboard sculptures arranged neatly on folding tables, children running between displays like rising stars. Liam ran straight to his favorite piece, a self-portrait of himself as an astronaut, in a red cape. He explained every detail to me like it was a grand exhibition. I smiled, but my eyes kept drifting to the door. 10 minutes later, he walked in. Derek. No fuss, no body language of power, no posturing. Just jeans, a blue shirt, and eyes lowered. No new girlfriend, no phone in hand, just him. And for the first time in a long while, he looked small. I watched from a distance. He hesitated at the entrance like he'd forgotten how to stand on neutral ground. Liam saw him first. "Dad!" It came out more like surprise than joy. But still, he ran toward him. Derek knelt and hugged him, not with drama or grip. Just a real quiet hug. Then he pulled back. "You okay?" he asked gently. Liam nodded. "I'm the astronaut with the cape." Derek smiled. "I saw, and you look amazing." I continued watching from afar. Derek moved among the artwork, actually looking, with intention, with presence. When Liam spoke, he listened. When he pointed at something, Derek followed. And most importantly, he didn't try to explain himself. No pictures, no speeches. He simply showed up. When the exhibit ended, I walked over. "Thank you for coming," I said. My voice was calmer than I expected. "I didn't come for me," he replied. "And I didn't know if I could look you in the eye. But I wanted to. Try." There was a time when that line might have broken me. Now it simply met me with clarity. I had survived so much more than words. "He deserves to be seen," I said. "Not just visited, not just performed for, really seen." Derek nodded. "I'm trying to learn the difference." That night, Liam fell asleep with the blue balloon tied loosely to his wrist. I stood in his doorway, feeling a quiet mix of exhaustion and hope. It was like the world was beginning to rearrange itself, not perfectly, but into something new. I opened my journal and wrote, "Today he came." Not with promises, but with quiet eyes. Liam smiled from the soul, and I breathed in peace, if only for a night. The following week, Rachel called. "I saw the post," she said. "He didn't mention the event, not even a sentence," I noticed. "And that doesn't bother you?" I paused for a second. "No, because for the first time, he did something that wasn't for applause." Rachel laughed. "Maybe there's a sliver of humanity in him after all." "Maybe," I said. "But it's no longer my job to find it." That Friday, I received an unexpected envelope. Plain paper. No law firm branding. Inside was a drawing, hand-drawn, a man holding a child's hand. Next to them, a rocket pointed at the stars. On the back, one sentence. "I'm not asking to pilot, just hoping to be on board, when it's allowed." No signature. But I knew who it was from. I smiled, folded it carefully, and tucked it in a drawer. Not to forget, but to remember that some things don't belong in court records. Some wounds become scars, others become bridges. Closure doesn't come wrapped in ribbons. It comes in half-empty rooms, in boxes you carry alone, in realizing that the person you once shared dreams with now looks like a stranger in your memories. It comes when you finally stop waiting for them to knock and start locking the door for good. 2 weeks had passed since the exhibition. Liam's drawing still hung on our fridge, the astronaut with the red cape smiling confidently into the stars. Every time I passed by, it reminded me, the children don't just survive change, they evolve through it, as long as we give them something solid to stand on. I had started therapy again. Not to talk about Derek, not even to talk about the past, but to figure out who I was without the chaos. And that was scarier than I thought. Because sometimes, after a storm, the quiet makes you wonder if you've lost your voice, or if you're finally about to hear it clearly. That Monday, I got a call from an unknown number. "Hello? Is this Olivia Morgan?" "Yes. Who's this?" "My name is Jenna. I think we've met. Once. Briefly. I'm Derek's ex. The one before the current one." I paused, unsure what to say. "I hope I'm not crossing a line," she continued. "But I saw what you posted about the school art exhibit, and I've been meaning to tell you something. I didn't know how to say it until now." My heart tensed. "Okay. I just wanted you to know. You weren't crazy." The silence that followed was deafening. "I mean," she added, "everything he did to you, the gaslighting, the disappearing, the rewriting of things, he did that to me too. And before me, to someone else. I found her on a forum once." My hand gripped the edge of the table. "I don't want anything from you," she said. "Just, if you ever feel doubt creeping in, I hope you remember it's not because you were weak. It's because he's very good at making strong women question themselves. After I hung up, I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry. What I felt was confirmation. A steady weight in my chest that whispered, "It wasn't all in your head." That night, I took out the last box I had refused to open since the divorce began. It was full of photographs, Polaroids, envelopes, even a few receipts I had once saved as keepsakes, movie tickets, concert stubs, a restaurant bill from our anniversary when we spent more on wine than rent. I sorted through them slowly. Some I tossed without hesitation. Others I held for a few seconds longer, but one photo stopped me cold. It was from Liam's second birthday. We were in the backyard, under the big oak tree. Derek was tossing Liam in the air, and I was reaching out, laughing, mid-step. The moment looked perfect, but I remembered the fight we had an hour before that. How I had cried in the bathroom, wiping mascara with toilet paper, pretending I had allergies. That was the thing about photos. They captured the image, not the truth. I tore it in half, and it didn't hurt like I thought it would. A week later, I sat down with Liam at the kitchen table. "Hey," I said, "how would you feel if we moved?" He blinked. "Like a new house? A new neighborhood? Closer to school? Closer to the park you like? It would be just us, though." He thought for a moment. "Would I still have my astronaut poster?" "Front and center," I smiled. "And the same bed?" "Of course," he nodded. "Okay, can we paint my room blue this time?" I hugged him tight. "Yes, blue. Just like your balloon." By Friday, I had signed the lease. It wasn't a mansion. It didn't have a pool or granite countertops, but it had light, big windows, a backyard with wildflowers, and peace, the kind of peace that doesn't brag, but stays. Rachel came over to help me pack. She paused while taping up a box labeled Memories. "You know," she said, "some people spend years waiting for closure to find them. You didn't wait, you built it." I smiled. "I'm still building." "You're not just building," she replied. "You're blooming." That night, I wrote one last entry in my old journal before locking it away. "I have carried enough weight that wasn't mine. I have apologized for things I didn't break. I have swallowed my own voice for far too long. And now, I speak. I choose me. I choose peace. I choose Liam. I choose this next chapter, one without footnotes of shame." The first night in the new house was quiet in a way I hadn't known in years. No upstairs neighbor dragging chairs, no distant shouting, no heavy footsteps pacing in tension. Just Liam's light breathing through the cracked door and the occasional chirp of a cricket somewhere in the garden. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, sipping tea from a chipped mug, staring out the window into the dark backyard. And for the first time, the silence didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like space. Space to grow. To be. I ran my fingers across the windowsill. The paint was old, chipped, the floor creaked in some corners. But it was ours. No ghost of arguments. In the walls. No echo of slammed doors. Just the future, raw and unwritten. The next morning, Liam woke up early, too excited to sleep in. He ran through the house in his superhero pajamas, stopping in every room like he was claiming the land. "This is my new kingdom," he announced, lifting a broomstick like a sword. "And where shall the queen rule from?" I played along. He pointed to the kitchen. "That's your castle, because you make pancakes." Fair enough. We spent the day unpacking, and for every box we opened, it felt like we were planting a new memory. He taped his drawings to the wall without worrying if they were straight. I hung wind chimes in the window even though Derek once said they were pointless noise. I danced while mopping. Liam laughed until he got the hiccups. There was no need to be perfect here, just present. Later that week, a letter arrived. Not a bill, not a court notice, just an envelope with no return address. I opened it slowly. Inside, a folded sheet of paper. "Olivia, I saw the photos of the new house. It looks peaceful, like you. I won't write again. I just wanted to say, thank you for raising Liam with so much strength, for not letting my mistakes bury his light. You deserved better. He deserves better. I'm trying to be that. In my own time. Goodbye. I didn't feel warmth or forgiveness, but I did feel something rare. Release. The part of me that once longed for apology had stopped waiting long ago. But this quiet acknowledgement was enough to close the door. Gently. One night, Rachel came over with 2 glasses of wine and a bag of frozen dumplings. To christen the new era, she declared, raising her glass. We sat on the floor, cross-legged, laughing over burnt edges and soy sauce spills. You're different, she said mid-bite. How so? You used to flinch every time your phone buzzed. You haven't looked at it once tonight. I glanced at it, face down, silent. I guess, I smiled. I finally realized I'm not on trial anymore. She leaned in. You never were. That weekend I took Liam to the park. He ran ahead toward the swings, his laughter echoing, across the field. I sat on a bench, letting the wind tangle my hair, watching mothers and children, couples and strollers pass by. A man sat beside me after a few minutes, tall, calm energy, salt and pepper beard. We exchanged smiles. Polite silence. Is that your son? He asked. Yes. The one in the blue jacket. He's got a strong swing. I chuckled. Yeah. He flies like he means it. He nodded, then hesitated. My daughter's the one with the red hat. Emma. I followed his gaze, a little girl building a fortress out of leaves. Looks like she's preparing for winter already, he laughed. She plans like a general. There was a pause. Not awkward, just present. I'm Mark, he offered. Olivia. Another smile, simple, unrushed. We didn't exchange numbers. There was no spark of flirtation, no urgency. But when I walked home that evening, Liam skipping beside me, I realized I felt open. Not waiting, not chasing, just open. I sat at my desk that night and opened a fresh notebook. Not the old journal full of tears and survival. A new one. A beginning. Chapter 1. The day I stopped surviving and started choosing joy. And as the ink dried, I felt something settle, a knowing, that I had made it through the fire, and on the other side I wasn't just standing, I was shining. New beginnings don't come with fireworks. They come with routine. They come with early mornings when your child refuses to wake up, and you're late, and the coffee burns. They come with mismatched socks, forgotten lunches, and texts you meant to send hours ago. They come when life is no longer surviving chaos, but learning how to live inside the calm. And I was learning. I was learning how to not panic at every email, how to laugh at my own mistakes, how to rest without guilt. The quiet life wasn't boring. It was sacred. One evening after Liam went to bed, I finally did something I hadn't done in years. I opened my old laptop, not for court documents or spreadsheets, but to write, not a journal, not a rant, a story. The cursor blinked at me like it was holding its breath. I had spent so long writing emails with lawyers and co-parenting schedules that I'd forgotten what it felt like to write without consequence, without fear, without someone watching over my shoulder, judging, correcting, twisting. So I wrote the first sentence that came to my mind. Once upon a time, there was a girl who loved dragons, not because they were scary, but because they never pretended to be kind. I didn't know what it meant yet, but I knew it was mine. And it felt good to make something again. Something that wasn't about Derek. Something that wasn't about pain. Just creation. Just me. A few days later, Liam brought home a note from school. Mom, he said, handing it to me. My teacher says you should come. Am I in trouble? He grinned. Probably. I opened the envelope. It was an invitation to a Family Voices night. Parents were invited to share short stories, poems, or songs with the class, a celebration of creativity and self-expression. Heart jumped a little. Should we go? I asked. He nodded enthusiastically. But only if you read something. Like the dragon one. I blinked. You read that? I saw it on your laptop. It was cool. I smiled. Okay. But only if you promise not to fall asleep during my reading. I'll try, he said, already halfway to the fridge. That night, I polished the piece, added a few lines, trimmed the awkward parts. I read it aloud to myself, surprised by how different my voice sounded when it wasn't tired or angry, just real. At the event, the classroom was filled with folding chairs, glitter posters, and the smell of glue sticks. Parents fidgeted with papers. Kids squirmed in seats. When it was my turn, I stood in front of a sea of wide eyes and shy smiles. My name is Olivia, I began, and I'm here to share a little story about bravery, not the kind with swords or shields, but the kind you find in quiet hearts, and I read. Afterward, a few parents came to thank me. One mom with tired eyes and paint-stained jeans whispered, "That line about the dragons? I needed that." And I realized something. Healing wasn't just about me. It was about echoes. When you speak your truth, it gives permission for others to do the same. The next morning, I received a message on social media. It was from a local librarian. I was at the Family Voices event. I loved your piece. Would you consider reading something at our next community night? It's a small event, nothing formal, just voices around a circle. I stared at the screen for a long time. My first instinct was to say no, to shrink, to hide, but then I remembered how it felt to stand in that classroom, to read, to be heard. So I typed, yes, I'd be honored. And with that, I felt the ground shift, not like an earthquake, but like a root finally breaking the surface of soil. I was growing. The library was quiet the night I read, not the kind of hush that demands silence, but the kind that invites. The chairs had been arranged in a loose circle. A few people trickled in, holding thermoses, jackets slung over arms. Most were strangers, but they smiled as they passed. One woman offered me a peppermint. Another asked where I got my boots. There was no stage, no microphone, just a lamp in the corner, a tray of cookies, and a community bulletin board behind us announcing yoga classes, food drives, and lost cats. It was ordinary. Beautifully so. I waited my turn, fingers brushing the folded pages in my lap. When my name was called, I stood, knees a little shaky, not from fear, but from the weight of something unfamiliar. Peace. My story, I began, is about what happens after the dragon is gone. And I read, this time, not to prove anything, not to fight, just to share. When I finished, no one clapped right away. There was just that moment, that breathless moment when people feel before they respond. Then applause came, gentle, warm, real. A woman across the circle wiped her eyes. A man leaned forward, elbows on knees, nodding. It wasn't fame. It wasn't glory. It was connection. After the reading, as I sipped chamomile tea and nibbled a sugar cookie, someone approached. It was Mark, from the park bench. Olivia, he said, smiling like we'd only paused the last conversation. Mark, I returned, genuinely glad to see him. I didn't know you wrote. I didn't either, until recently. He chuckled. Well, you should keep going. That was brave. I'm learning how to be. He looked down for a moment, then back at me. Emma's with her mom this weekend, but I'd love to bring her next time. I think she'd like your dragons. Smiled. They'd probably like her too. We talked a little more about books, parenting, music we missed from our 20s. There was no agenda, no flirtation, just a meeting of people who'd been bruised by life, but hadn't let it break them. And as he left, I realized the part of me that once defined myself by Derek's absence had shifted. I was no longer filling a void. I was building something new. That weekend, I reorganized the closet. I found a box I hadn't opened since the move, full of old photos, wedding memorabilia, legal documents, and notes scribbled in moments of chaos. I sat on the floor, the box in front of me like an unopened time capsule. One by one, I sorted its contents. Some I kept: Liam's baby footprints, a letter from my grandmother, a drawing he'd made with both our names. But others, the ones heavy with grief, with manipulation, with control, I let go. I didn't need to hold on to pain to remember how far I'd come. The memory of survival wasn't in the artifacts, it was in the mirror. That night, I took the box to the fireplace and lit it piece by piece. Not in anger, not in revenge, in release. As the flames crackled and the papers curled into ash, I whispered quietly, "Thank you, and goodbye." I walked back inside, barefoot on the cold floor, wrapped in a blanket. Liam was asleep, one arm over his stuffed dinosaur, mouth slightly open. I kissed his forehead. Then I sat at my desk, opened my notebook, and wrote, "The bravest stories are the ones we live, not the ones we tell." And with that, I closed the chapter. Not just in the book, in me. It was a Tuesday, one of those gray, unremarkable ones, when I realized I was no longer afraid of my own life. The house didn't feel like a shell anymore. It echoed with Liam's laughter, the smell of banana pancakes, the low hum of music playing while we folded laundry. The silence no longer haunted me. It held me. The courthouse, once a site of humiliation and pain, had faded from my dreams. No more waking up in cold sweat, no more rehearsing lines I never said. Just rest. And in that rest, something grew. Me, Liam, had a school project, family traditions, and he wanted to bake cookies. Like Grandma used to, he said, pulling out the faded index cards from the recipe tin. I let him take the lead. He spilled flour, broke an egg too hard, and licked the spoon too early. But it wasn't about cookies. It was about memories, about building new ones. When the cookies were cooling, he looked at me and asked, "Do you think Dad would want one?" I paused, not from hurt but consideration. "I think he might," I said. "And you can decide if you want to give him one." Liam thought, then shrugged. "Maybe. I'll see how he's being." I nodded. Fair enough. That was the difference now. I didn't speak about Derek with bitterness. I didn't have to. Liam would see who his father was and who I was through the consistency of love, not lectures. That weekend, the community library hosted a local storytelling festival. I was invited to read again, this time on the main stage. My piece was called "The Day I Stopped Waiting to Be Saved." The small auditorium was packed: neighbors, friends, parents from Liam's school, even a few strangers who had heard about the woman who read about dragons. As I stood backstage holding the printed story, I caught sight of someone in the crowd. Mark, and beside him a girl, around Liam's age, dark curls, bright eyes. Emma. They waved. I smiled, and then another face appeared, unexpected. Derek. He wasn't there with malice. His posture was uncertain, hands buried in pockets, standing at the back. It didn't scare me. It surprised me, yes, but didn't shake me. I turned my gaze back to the front. My voice would not tremble because of him. It never would again. When I took the stage, I breathed in. My name is Olivia, and once upon a time I thought surviving meant staying quiet. But now I know surviving means speaking. And I read. My voice was clear. My words unapologetic. I told a story not of revenge, but of rebirth, of what it means to lose everything, and then realize you were never the thing that was lost. After the reading, the applause was thunderous. People stood, not for the drama, for the truth. I stepped down, heart full. Liam ran to hug me. Mark gave me a nod of deep respect. Emma smiled shyly. Then Derek approached. "I just wanted to say," he began, his voice softer than I remembered. "You were powerful." I didn't thank him. I didn't scorn him. I simply said, "I know," and walked away. That night, after the event, the house was unusually quiet. Not the awkward silence that used to cling to the walls after arguments or court dates, but a deep, calming stillness. Liam was asleep early, tuckered out from excitement and cookies. I sat alone on the couch, barefoot, wrapped in my old gray sweater, staring at nothing in particular. The applause from earlier still rang faintly in my ears, but it wasn't what echoed the loudest. What echoed was something much quieter, the knowledge that I had done it. I had stood before a crowd that included my past and my future, and I didn't flinch. My phone buzzed. It was a message from the Fori, local community center. Olivia, we'd love to talk to you about leading a creative writing workshop for women rebuilding after divorce. Your story tonight was unforgettable. Let's chat? I read it twice. A smile tugged at my mouth. I hadn't planned this, to become a voice, a guide, an example. But maybe that's how all callings begin. Quietly. After the storm. In the rebuilding. I replied, yes, I'd love to. Then I closed the phone, rested it on the table, and looked around at the life I had made. It was simple. It was mine. The next morning, Liam shuffled into the kitchen with bedhead and socks that didn't match. Mom, he said through a yawn. You were awesome last night. Thanks, kiddo. Did you see Dad there? I nodded. What did he say? That I was powerful. Liam chewed on his toast. He's right. But I knew that already. I ruffled his hair. Me too. Later that afternoon, we went to the park. The sun was gentle, not too hot. A few birds squabbled over crusts by the bench. Liam played tag with Emma while Mark and I talked about books, summer plans, and why healing doesn't come in straight lines. There was no tension, no rush, no pretense, just presence. As the kids played, I looked around and saw something I hadn't in a long time. Joy, not borrowed, not forced, but earned. I had peeled off the layers of humiliation, of gaslighting, of smallness. I had burned the Trosh had told my story, and now I was writing new chapters, not for revenge, not for validation, but for the sheer miracle of being able to choose the pen again. That night, I lit a single candle on the porch and sat in the dusk, one hand around my tea, the other holding my journal. I wrote, some endings don't break you. They break you open. Then I paused, closed the book gently, and looked up at the stars. They were scattered, a little chaotic, a little dim. But they were still shining, and so was I.